Welcome to the Ben and Lauren Show. I'm Ben, and here's Lauren. And here we are. It is Saturday night.
That's been a while.
I know. We've been doing the shows on Sundays and whenever else.
Probably what's happening is Dustin and Cassie are doing their show live and we're missing it.
Oh, probably. Phone will probably blink in a minute. So, it's been an interesting week. We've been very productive. You can tell.
Yeah, I have a sunburn.
Well, for one thing, we've been outside. That's always a nice thing. The sun's been shining. We're getting our vitamin D, kind of getting out of the house, not quite so cooped up. It's like kind of coming back from a long sleep, a long winter sleep.
The weather's still pretty cold, but the sun's getting closer. You can really feel a lot more heat, and the birds are singing. The cardinals always start singing.
Oh man,
first.
when the birds start singing.
Abigail stuck her head out the door wall today. When she heard the birds, she got her boots on, her coat on, and she was gone for the rest of the day. Well, she was outside the rest of the day. It was just as cold as it was yesterday, but there was birds singing.
So we started to do some spring cleaning, starting to get things ready. The biggest accomplishment, I would say by far, we've had a washer and dryer down in the basement for about, 7 years?
7 years.
So we got the dolly, we lugged it up the stairs, and we put them out at the curb.
And they're gone.
I mean, they didn't work. And I don't know why we had a not working washer and dryer. I guess maybe we were hopeful it would just start working someday by itself.
Well, I think you had thoughts of trying to repair the dryer.
I actually did. I tried to repair the dryer, tried to repair the washer. It never really got anywhere. And I abandoned the project and sat down there ever since.
And then you were kind of worried, I think, about trying to get them up the stairs by yourself.
But I managed.
And I've been expecting so many times in the past 7 years that I
Lauren
can't
and I
really
managed.
help.
We did it together, and it went well. And I hope a scrapper got it. I really do.
I do too.
But if they didn't,
we put it out early enough while the sun was still up the day before garbage day that if a scrapper wanted it, it was there.
Yep.
We can't get it actually to the scrapyard because we don't have a vehicle that we can put them in.
We also, all winter long, got a lot of Amazon packages and various things, and the HelloFresh, and we just had a giant accumulation of boxes because we hadn't been throwing them away. So I broke them all down, put them all at the curb.
Yeah, I hope a recycler was coming through because between the cardboard and
the metal. But it just is a huge relief to get this stuff out of our house. We've got a lot more to go.
I've been getting the washer and the dryer started because when we caught the mice in our storage room, which we haven't caught any for 2 weeks now.
They're cleaned out.
So thankfully we didn't have much of a mouse infestation. I think for right now, what did we end up six of them?
That was 5.
6.
6?
Yeah, because we caught 3 the one day, one another day, and then we had a week and then we caught one last one.
Yep, so 6.
So 6. After that, I started looking at our basement and looking at the amount of stuff that we have there that it really needs better organization, and we have too much stuff down there.
Yeah.
There's stuff that just isn't being used and probably never will be used, and
Between
there's no
both
reason.
of us. Actually, if we had better storage, better organization, shelving, that sort of thing, that would help.
Those things might get used then.
So then some of it, if we know we have it, we'll use it. But right now it's all kind of sitting on the ground in boxes and we just forget about it.
Right.
So our goal is organization and disposal.
Right.
Throwing stuff away.
We have, somebody had partially finished our basement before I moved in, but then we added another, almost as much basement to it. So we have the old basement, the new basement. And in the new basement, we have a lot of construction supplies still, some of which I'm not sure we will ever use. But they kind of belong to the house in a way.
Kind of.
In the old basement, there was stuff that we moved in, and then there was all this commotion between construction, and we had to move everything from upstairs, downstairs to refinish all the wood floors. And that happened when Susanna was about born. Susanna's about to be 6. So it feels like we've spent 6 years between our yard and our basement just digging out of all the chaos that happened in those 2 years.
It's sort of been project by project by project.
We started off with 3 of the rooms in our house not being usable.
Right, but we recovered them.
I gradually recovered those.
My office, where I'm doing my office work now.
Yes, that and the girls' bedroom.
Even the girls'
bathroom
bedroom.
It was all piled up with stuff because Grandma Lila was here and then Grandma Lila died. And we had a lot of stuff from her. We had a whole bunch of bins and we had furniture and...
So it was 6 years ago? No.
6 years.
6 years.
It's 6 years coming up in June since Grandma died, and
Wow.
we were doing the We were doing the construction starting in April the year before. So it's been 6 years, almost 7, since we started construction.
Doesn't seem that long ago.
No, it doesn't, but it
But
has
that's
been.
most of our children's ago.
Most of our children's.
We only had Abigail and Susanna when that project started.
Just Abigail.
Just
Abigail
Abigail?
was Rebecca's age when we started
Oh, my.
construction.
My.
She was 4 months old.
So, I think our children deserve a house without construction material in it someday.
I don't mind the construction material so much as our storage room. So in our partially finished older basement, we have this storage room. And the storage room has gradually accumulated all kinds of weird odds and ends. We've got a pantry down there. That's where we keep all our canned goods, like our applesauce that we made and all stuff like that. Then we have all the clothes, so bins of the kids' clothes of different sizes. Then we have bins in my off-season clothes. Then we have kinds of stuff.
We have a ton of stuff just hanging up, like on hangers.
Coats of various sizes.
So it's like a gigantic closet.
Well, it's a combination, pantry and closet.
Yeah, it just needs to be a pantry.
So what we've decided to do is we have a laundry room down there. We're going to put all the clothing things in the laundry room. We're going to keep all the food stuff in the pantry.
And really the first step is to get big giant items out of there like washing machines and dryers.
Yes,
that we're not using.
In the laundry room, we had an extra washer and dryer just sitting down there.
And what a blessing it is that we have this, but if they don't work, they're just taking up space, not doing anything. You know? I mean, it'd be nice to find someone who could maybe repair it, get them to work again, but it's not always easy. I hate throwing things away that have the potential for being useful.
And that's where we've been discussing our philosophy on getting things.
But they were gifts to us anyway, weren't they?
They came with the house, those two.
Didn't we get one from Seed Planner?
The ones we're using right now were the ones that were gifts.
Oh, that's amazing. So the ones that came with the house are the ones that we basically threw away.
Yes, they were older and
they were older. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had another interesting thing happen when the seasons changed. We were outside the other day and we noticed this drip happening.
Yeah, the girls built a box fort underneath our parent mom and dad's maple tree next door, and they just had a major trimming on that tree.
They cut it way back.
3 or 4 major limbs on the big maple tree, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. And this is by a tree removal company that normally just gets rid of trees.
Yeah, they took off quite a bit off that tree. I'm not sure the established maple really needed quite that much taken off it, but
they're not arborists. They don't know how to actually prune a tree or anything like that.
They just cut off branches.
So.
And they cut them in weird ways. They sliced them this way instead of slicing them with the trunk, and it was.
So the girls were playing underneath the tree?
Yep. And Elena comes up to me, Mom, the tree is dripping maple syrup. I tasted it and it's really good. She's standing under the tree with her mouth open because the tree limbs way up high are dripping sap.
Like little drops.
It's like
falling
raindrops.
from the sky.
It's like a shower. She's under there drinking the maple syrup. She's like, Mom, the tree is raining maple syrup. And Ben says,
it's a maple tree.
Ben goes, oh my, it is.
So I ran in and I basically got 2 5-gallon buckets and some Tupperware and some bowls and things and just put them underneath where the drips were and started collecting.
It looks kind of funny.
It does look a little funny. So we had a full day's worth of collecting maple syrup, and how much did we get? Maybe
we got 2 quarts.
So we got 2 quarts of these drips. And so we did something kind of neat. Here's our prop time. We made maple syrup.
We did.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's a little light, but I didn't want to boil it down any further.
Well, it's not really syrup. It's more like a concentrated.
It's syrup. Have you tasted it?
Well, it's very sweet. It's very sweet, but it's not syrupy.
Very thick.
It's very liquidy. But it tastes like maple syrup. Very, very sugary, very sweet.
And then the sap stopped dripping, so we put all the buckets in. Well, then we got a snowfall, and it warmed up again. So, of course, it caused the trees to do the sap running again. So today they were raining sap again.
And I think we might get more this time. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you set them up a little better. So we've got another couple buckets outside collecting sap.
And hopefully it's dripping right now. By tomorrow we'll get some more.
See, my whole life I thought that you could only get sap from a sugar maple to make maple syrup.
Yeah, what is this, a silver maple?
This is a silver maple. There's another one we've got 2 other maples on mom and dad's property and one on ours, and they're not silver.
So if we actually tapped the tree the way you're supposed to actually collect the maple syrup, we can get a lot of maple syrup. I mean, this is not a lot of maple syrup, but this is drips. This is the sap just dripping out of the cut tree limbs.
The trees are pretty substantial trees. Now, ours is not very healthy.
No.
Ours really does need pruning. I was
But
telling
even
Ben we
so,
should get
there
an
might
estimate on
there
actually
might
pruning
still
it.
be a whole bunch of sap in there, healthy or not.
Well, yeah, there's sap, but I'm not sure that I would tap the tree because we could compromise it even further.
I see what you're saying. It would hurt the tree.
I think I'd want to get that tree healthier before I tapped it.
But Mom and Dad have another maple tree.
And those trees are in pretty good shape. And so you put a tap in a tree those size, and they're well watered and everything. They don't feel a little half-inch tap.
Well, you know, our neighbor across the street has a maple tree that's in real bad shape. It's got a gigantic fluorescent X on it,
I
which
think they're going to cut it
think
down.
means they're going to get rid of it. But I'm tempted to say, hey, before you cut down that tree, do you mind if we tap it? You know?
I think the time to do that would have been like a week ago, though.
Well, it's probably flowing sap right now, isn't it? Or
I
if
guess
the other,
so.
If the other
That's
tree
what
is.
the other is.
So, I mean, that sap doesn't go anywhere. It's sitting in there, right?
Right, but I think there's a period of time that you don't want to tap the tree because it's actually putting its energy into the leaves and everything. And
Well, there's no leaves yet.
right. I mean, I do think there's a finite time that you want to tap it. I don't know when that is. We'd have to look it up.
Anyway, we're thinking about tapping every maple tree in our neighborhood now, if they'd let us.
I was more thinking about looking like at the maples along the bike trail and stuff, which nobody uses.
We'd have to have
trees.
camouflage collection
taps.
Don't tell anyone.
Well, you're not going to hurt the trees.
I'm sorry,
And
when you
nobody's using them.
when you have maple syrup falling from the sky and you're collecting it in buckets, it seems like it makes a lot more sense just tapping it the way you're supposed to. Anyway, so that's been an exciting thing that we've done. We would do a taste test, but there's so little, and we've already tasted it. It's good.
We're waiting for Ben's mom and dad to get home from
Yeah.
Florida, and I found some recipes that use maple syrup, and I was thinking about making a special dessert or something that uses maple syrup so we could actually share it.
And how novel would that be? Because I've grown up with that tree in their yard my whole life. And
I know, it would be pretty neat.
And I've always wondered, does any maple tree just produce maple syrup? And the answer is pretty much yes.
It turns out, yes, you can tap any maple tree. Sugar maples have the highest quality sap, meaning you get the most sugar content in their sap, so you have to boil it down the least.
This is a silver maple.
And silver maples apparently have a lot more sediment in the sap, and we did have to run that through a coffee
Yeah.
filter. There was a lot of sediment when we cooked it down. I mean, we
Yeah.
ran it through a filter to start with, but then we had to filter it again. But apparently, silver maples are just as likely to give you maple sap, maple syrup, as any other maple. You can tap any maple in your yard. I wish I had known that. How many gallons of maple syrup we could have.
I know. So we read the Torah portion last night, and then today I read about Purim. We didn't actually read the story of Esther, but we started reading a little bit about Purim and the holiday that's coming up. It's Monday night.
Yeah, we've sort of noted Purim in
Yeah.
passing before Purim.
But it seems like that's how we always start with the feast days. And this is not a feast day. This is more of a celebration.
I don't remember. It's sort of like 4th of July or...
But what we do is we usually start off with just acknowledging the time, and then we start investigating, okay, how should we do this more properly? And so we read the section in Esther where it talks about Mordecai actually sending the decree out on how this day should be observed. And, the question always comes up, we're not Jewish. That's a Jewish holiday that was directed to them only. Why would we want to acknowledge this day?
And God didn't institute it either, so
right.
it's kind of more...
Moses didn't institute it.
You think, okay, well, it's not really something we have to do. Is it something that we should remember? Because it's been included for many years. I mean, our older Jewish brothers and sisters are remembering it.
They sure are. Well, some people remember it as like a Halloween type event where everyone gets dressed up in costumes and drinks a whole lot.
Trunk or treat.
Yeah. And I don't think that's exactly the way God really would want us to honor that day.
Wait, if someone else has that tradition, that's their tradition. But if we're looking at it as, is this something that we ought to keep in mind? And Ben brought up an interesting point. He was saying that some of the stories in the Bible, say like the story of Daniel and his friends, and the story of Esther, they're stories about the people of Israel, God's people. Whether it's Israel or not, these are God's people, God's chosen people.
Mm-hmm.
and they're outside of his land. And by being grafted into the family of God's people, that doesn't make us Jewish, it makes us of God's people. So this becomes somewhat of our adopted heritage,
Right.
is that we come from a line of God's people. And we are not in God's land. We are in exile the same way they are. We are not in God's kingdom yet. We carry a little of God's kingdom with us, but we're not in the kingdom. So the stories of the people who were not able to be in God's land become a little bit of a roadmap for us of what it's like to live not in God's land and what God finds pleasing and not pleasing in that situation.
Well, like the stories of Daniel, in Babylon, the
Right.
story of Purim in Persia, and we hear about Iran so much right now in the news. Kind of makes you wonder.
Yeah, it does. But that's where Purim came up, and what we discussed today was, as people of God who are not in the land, what does it mean?
It's us.
Yeah, what does it mean to set aside the time of Purim? It's a month before Passover. It commemorates a time when all God's people in exile were very nearly wiped out.
Yeah. And we put ourselves in that situation. Imagine if our generation or our children's generation, ever have to experience something like the story of Esther. And perhaps it would involve people far beyond just a certain ethnic group, or maybe a very wide ethnic group.
What if our philosophy was targeted to be wiped out?
Exactly. And I'll tell you, it seems like our philosophy is targeted to be wiped out.
So, in keeping alive the memory of what happened at Purim, it's causing us and our children to practice remembering that God takes care of his people even when it looks like everybody's going to get wiped out.
And who knows, maybe one of our children will be in a position to do something about it.
Maybe one of our children has to be Esther someday,
Right.
or Mordecai.
Or Mordecai.
But whatever the case, that might be the value of remembering Purim, is that we also are strangers in a strange land, and we worship our Creator, even though increasingly the people around us do not, and hate us for it.
Now, typically for Purim, we just read the story of Esther, and then we eat hamantaschen.
We started doing that because we read about how everyone else makes hamantaschen, and it's like, we make what? And then we made them, and they were really good, so we
have 'em, yeah.
accidentally acquired that tradition.
Well, they're good. They're cookies. Cookies
Okay.
are an easy tradition to pick up.
They're basically thumbprint cookies. They're butter cookies with jam in them. I mean, how are you going to go around with that?
They're good. They're yummy. But this year we kind of were paying attention to the text and reading a little bit more specifically about how to observe it. Beyond reading the text, that's first and foremost. It also talks about having a nice meal, like actually having a feast.
He said, have a feast with joy and gladness. So it's
So-
not a solemn meal like Passover. This is a meal of joy and gladness.
Right, more like Sukkot. It's an actual celebration.
And it was 2 days. It was the 14th and 15th day of Adar, which is the last day
It's
of
basically
the calendar.
the day before and the full moon.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that it's going to be Monday?
Was it Monday night or Tuesday night?
Monday and Tuesday? We should know this. If we're going to take it seriously.
We'll check by tomorrow just to make sure.
So it's a 2-day. It's not a Sabbath. It's just a normal.
It's not a God's commanded holiday, although the Jewish people think of it as that because they feel that the rabbis sanctioned it and commanded it, so it's therefore commanded by God.
So in addition to reading the scroll of Esther, having a feast, giving food gifts, and actually sending food gifts to various people. And it's
People you're
interesting.
close to, though.
Right. And it's interesting because the way traditionally it's done is similar to traditions that we're familiar with, where you get a basket together, full of goodies, or you get a tray full of cookies, or it just, come up with unique items like wine or peanuts, or maybe not peanuts, mixed nuts, something a little more exotic.
Nice things that you would give to each other as
Chocolate.
usually food items that are for celebration.
Beef jerky. Hey, if I got beef jerky as a gift, I'd be excited about it. And then that was the third commandment. The fourth commandment is to give to the poor.
This is what Mordecai sent out to
Right.
the people in Persia at the time, saying, this is how this day is to be commemorated.
Right.
So that was his things were to have a feast with joy and gladness, to give food gifts to each other, and to give to the poor.
Right, and some people get very technical about, okay, it has to be more than one, it has to be done during the daytime, it has to be this, has to be that. We're more interested in just sort of fulfilling those 4 things. It's not complicated.
I guess that means we better think up a really nice dinner.
Yep. Nice dinner and a nice gift basket.
I don't know how we always end up doing this stuff at the last minute. The first time we really celebrate a holiday, we always do it at the last minute.
That's just how we do it. And if we're going to be stopping at the store tomorrow, then we'll have an opportunity to put it all together.
We're going to take our life in our hands?
Yes.
Brave coronavirus?
We are going to wash our hands. We'll put lots of hand sanitizer.
We can't do that. Everyone's bought out of hand sanitizer. You know what? That means that the little bottles of hand sanitizer we have are probably going for a high price on the black market. You know, we might be selling it at the street corner, kind of.
There we go. There we go. Get your Corona killer.
I saw someone post a picture of a little bag of hand sanitizer. It says, Purell, I've got the good stuff. Meet me at the corner at midnight.
I think we should just put a sticker on it that says Corona killer and $100 a squirt. It could save your life.
Well, actually, the flu is a much bigger problem right now. My sister's entire family are down with type A flu, and her father-in-law had a heart attack in conjunction with it. He's almost the same. He's only a few years older than my dad.
Yeah.
So he's in the hospital. Thankfully, he was not out shoveling snow when he had a heart attack. We lost a friend that way a few years ago.
So I'm kind of looking forward to Purim. I think it's going to be a good celebration. And I think it's good to practice. You know, it might be clunky. It's always clunky the first time you do it. When you take it, you know, when you try to actually do it the way it ought to be done.
Right.
You know, it's easy to honor the time and to kind of do it your own way and maybe do some traditional things. But when you actually try to take the day a little more like, okay, do these things.
What are we doing this for? Why are we remembering it? What are we trying to pass on to our children?
I mean, the first year we did Passover, it was embarrassing.
That was terrible.
It was embarrassing.
It was terrible.
And our extended family said, oh, you can't do this by
over.
yourselves. You must all come together. And it was just...
Oh, that was awful.
And I think that they weren't too impressed with our observance of that day. Did not seem very solemn.
I think we may have actually done some damage.
We may have. But it was premature. We should have said no. We should have said no.
We should have said, guys, let's get our thoughts in order a little bit about what we're doing.
And ironically, if we invite them to what we're doing now, after years and years of practice,
it would be a lot different.
It would be totally different.
Yeah. We have a better idea of what we're trying to remember and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to teach our kids. And
so hopefully Purim, you know,
don't anybody show up at our door for Purim.
Well, they'll show up for the Hamantashans.
You can show up for Hamantashans.
But hopefully 6 years, 5 years, 3 years down the line, we'll look and say, remember when we just barely knew what we were supposed to do or what we should do for this day? And now, hopefully, if we do it joyously, our children will look forward to it. And that's really the goal. Right. And if they can look forward to the joyous holidays, I want them to also appreciate the more solemn holidays.
And all of this has happened in conjunction with watching all the political maneuvering going on this week. And we are watching the rise of an ideology that hates us. We're
watching Haman rising right now.
We are individualists who worship our God. And it's black and white as far as we believe in him and we are going to obey him rather than men.
Absolutely.
And that's always our decision, just like Daniel's friends. And we're watching the rise of a philosophy that believes that everybody is really a part of the state, and the state should take care of you, and the institutions and the professionals should be in charge of every life thing that happens to you, from your children being born, to what you teach them, to where you live when you're old. I mean, Medicare for all, what in the world is that?
Right.
The state's going to take care of you for every medical thing that happens.
Whether you agree with the medical decisions or not.
Right. And whether if you're old enough, well, you might as well just go die now because we don't need to take care of you anymore. You're too old to live. Your child has Down syndrome. Oh, what a shame. You know what? We don't support health care for kids with Down syndrome.
So all this to say that we see Haman rising again.
We see Haman rising. It's going to... And our children need to know and to remember that in spite of what you see happening, God is still in control, can still rescue you, and you need to be ready to be in the place that God needs you to be the tool to be used to rescue people if necessary.
And it's a Christian holiday. And here's my case. It's a Christian holiday because it's all about celebrating the salvation of God. Who is salvation? We know who he is. He's the Messiah.
This is just another time that salvation was brought.
We are acknowledging the salvation that God sent. And whether it's through Esther or through Mordecai or through his very own son, it's all the salvation that comes from God.
And really, that in the end is what Hanukkah is also about.
Yes. Salvation
Insurmountable odds when God's people look like they are going to be wiped out and God saves them. And every time we celebrate that, every time we do, and this is why Thanksgiving in America is important too, because the same thing happened there. Mm-hmm. They were people who came here worshiping God, and they almost died, and God saved them. And that's what Thanksgiving is for. That's what it's celebrating. And every time we celebrate that, every time we make traditions around it, and we remember it, and we tell that story, we strengthen our understanding that God is, and he takes care of those who follow him, even when it looks like there's no way out of this.
And I think that's why it's important not only to acknowledge these holidays, but also practice, so that it becomes second nature. Oh yeah, Purim's coming up. I don't know if you've noticed, but I have reminded the children multiple times.
Yes, you have.
I want them to know Purim's coming. This is a big deal. Purim's coming just in a few days. Because secular holidays will come up, or at least the ones that we observe, like Thanksgiving, and it's on the calendar, and everyone's talking about it. It's on the news. Where are you
going to go for Thanksgiving?
It's all everyone talks about. So I almost have to go out of your way just to say, a very important day is coming up. A holiday is coming up.
Right.
So I think that's what we wanted to talk about. Is there
Yep.
anything else you wanted to conclude the Ben and Lauren show with?
Nope, because we
final
have
thoughts?
a tendency to repeat ourselves and ramble if we try to do that. So,
all right. Well, I think that's a good stopping point. I want to wish everyone a wonderful evening and say good night, Lauren.
Good night, Lauren.
She does it every time. Good night,
You'd be
everyone.
disappointed if I didn't.
Good night, everyone.